Welcome back to our channel. Today, I've got an explosive story for you. Imagine dedicating your life and saving over $1 million for your children, only to find out they've cruelly chosen their father's new wife over you on your own birthday. But here's the twist. At the end of the story, our resilient protagonist makes a bold, shocking move that no one saw coming. She gives every single penny away to strangers in need. Trust me, you don't want to miss the dramatic build-up to this stunning decision. Before we dive into this unforgettable tale, please hit that subscribe button to support the channel and never miss out on our captivating stories. Also, comment down below where you're tuning in from and let us know what you'd do if you were in her shoes. Now, grab your favorite drink and settle in because this story is about to get intense. I still remember the jolt of betrayal as if it were an electric shock snapping through my bones. On my 66th birthday, the very children I'd sacrificed my entire existence for left me alone, waiting at a table of untouched food. It should have been a day of shared laughter, heartfelt toasts, and life-changing news, for I had secretly won $20 million in the lottery just a week earlier. After taxes, I would walk away with more than $10 million. My plan was simple yet profound. Buy each of my two adult children a luxury property and hand them each a $1 million check. You might think such a surprise would bring any family closer together. Yet I found myself sitting in a cold, empty dining room with no knocks on the door and no ringing phone to say, "Happy birthday, Mom." Instead, I discovered that my son and daughter were off lavishing their affections on the woman who had once been my ex-husband's mistress. They even called her Mom. Perhaps my story sounds unbelievable, but let me warn you, family ties can be tenuous, and blood alone doesn't guarantee loyalty. My name is Mirabelle Crandall, and once I was a trusting wife, then a determined single mother, and now I'm a woman who finally learned to place her own needs at the forefront. Betrayal can push people in many directions. In my case, it moved me towards self-discovery and liberation. As you follow this tale, you'll witness how desperation, heartache, and resilience shaped every decision I made. You'll also see how, after a lifetime of sacrifice, a single heartbreak can shift an entire future. I want to start by asking you a quick favor. Please comment 1 if you believe my story is justified, or 2 if you think there's a better path I could have taken. Also, where are you reading from? I'd love to know. Fasten your seatbelt because this is no gentle stroll down memory lane. This is a raw account that will peel back the layers of a family marred by hidden affairs, shattered trust, and the false promise that giving everything to your children will guarantee their love. Here is my story, told in full. The tale truly began a week before that ill-fated birthday. I was slumping into my sofa after a morning yoga class when the TV blared the winning lottery numbers. I had joined the frenzy only because my closest friend, Harriet, kept nudging me to live a little after retirement. Sure, Harriet loved teasing me about my thrifty nature, but I always reminded her I was a single mother who had to raise two kids, Damon and Layla, on her own. Money never came easy, so I'd learned to be frugal out of necessity. But on that day, each drawn number on the screen matched the ticket clutched in my shaking fingers. My eyes welled with tears of disbelief. I could hardly breathe. $20 million. Since I was young, I'd never seen more than a few thousand in my checking account at any one time. Immediately, my mind turned to Damon and Layla. All the times they'd needed help with rent, or med school dreams, or childcare. I had never hesitated, never turned them away, because to me, caring for your children was life's highest calling. Overcome with excitement, I decided to keep my winnings a secret, believing the perfect time to unveil it would be on my birthday. I would gather them at my house for dinner, like I did every year, then show them the real estate contracts along with a check for each. I remember spending several afternoons strolling through high-end property listings, imagining Damon's smile and Layla's tears of joy. I never once predicted that neither of them would bother to show up. My intended grand reveal was carefully planned for 7 p.m. on the evening of my 60s kisses. By 10 that night, I was still seated at the dining table, each meticulously prepared dish going cold. No calls, no footsteps in the driveway, not a single text message except for Layla's earlier claim of working late and Damon's alleged project emergency. At around 11:47 p.m., Layla finally phoned to say she was just too swamped to come home, so I should rest early. That was it. I felt my heart rattle inside my chest. When my son Damon also failed to appear, I grew frightened something terrible had happened. I remember pacing the living room, glancing at the clock, and thinking about the million scenarios where they might be in danger. Perhaps Layla had a major accident on the highway, or Damon's project was so urgent that he was stuck in an all-night crisis. But then midnight passed, and logic told me that if something dire had happened, someone, anyone, would have let me know by now. Sleep came to me on the living room couch, tears staining my cheeks. I'd braced myself for the next day, determined to ask them in the morning what was so important they had to ignore my birthday. Yet when dawn broke, my phone was silent as ever. I texted them, politely asking them to come home for dinner. I'd prepared a surprise. Hours crawled by, and still not a single response came. Refusing to wallow in misery, I forced myself outside for a breath of fresh air. My neighbor Harriet was out walking her dachshund. She teased me for my late start. Typically, we strolled together around 6 a.m., chatting about her grandchildren or the best farmers markets. Before I could think of a decent excuse, Harriet rolled her eyes in that knowing way. "You stayed up all night cooking for Damon and Layla, didn't you?" Her voice held both a playful jab and genuine sympathy. I was too embarrassed to confirm it. But the real punch in the gut came from Trudy, an old coworker and longtime rival who appeared out of nowhere and decided to rub salt into my wound. She sneered at me, bragging that she'd just seen Damon and Layla at a fancy anniversary party for my ex-husband, Reginald, and his wife, Celeste. Yes, the same woman who had once been known as Reginald's other woman. Trudy gleefully spilled every mortifying detail about the expensive gifts they'd lavished on Celeste. I felt my body turn cold. Before continuing, let me quickly ask, is the betrayal as shocking to you as it was to me? Let me know. Comment 1 if you felt a sting on my behalf, or 2 if you think I should have seen it coming. Trudy's phone was thrust at me, playing a video that made my world spin. Celeste stood at the head of a lavish banquet, beaming with pride. Beside her, linking arms with a younger version of my ex, was my adult son, Damon. My granddaughter, Elise, called Celeste Grandma Celeste, her sweet voice asking if Celeste would attend her preschool sports day. From the video, I saw a banner that read, "Happy 25th Wedding Anniversary, Reginald and Celeste." Another side banner wished Celeste a happy birthday. Worst of all, Damon and Layla were pictured handing Celeste expensive gifts. Damon had a custom gold bracelet made for her. Layla bestowed an entire gold jewelry set. The camera panned to an array of luxurious brandy bottles for Reginald. Tears gathered in my eyes, but the camera didn't care. It showed me everything I needed to know. My children had chosen that woman over me, offering her all the love and attention I'd been starving for. Of course, Trudy didn't stop. She was determined to see me crumble. Harriet tried to hush her, but she bulldozed on, poking fun at me for boasting in the past that my kids were dutiful. I felt humiliated, as if I had just been stripped of every ounce of pride in front of the entire neighborhood. Finally, something in me broke. I turned away and somehow made it back home without collapsing. Inside, The house still smelled of last night's homemade feast, now cold and cloying. I recall leaning against the door, letting the tears come freely. My heart stung with an ache that was both new and old, dredging up memories I'd spent decades burying. My painful divorce from Reginald, the years I struggled as a single mother with two babies, the quiet nights I spent questioning how love could wilt so easily. If you're still with me, I'd love a quick check. Where are you reading from? Let's share a bit of our backgrounds. Sometimes knowing someone out there empathizes can be healing. So drop a comment. I'm truly curious about your side of the world. It's impossible to explain my children's betrayal without telling you how everything fell apart years ago. Reginald was older by 6 years, working as a data analyst in the city's public works department when we met. I was a proofreader for a small publishing house, scraping by to help my parents cover my brother's education. My parents adored Reginald. Stable job, they said. Already has a house, they said. We married too quickly, but I was naive enough to believe the stoic, steady affection he showed me was real. Within a year, we had twin babies, Damon and Layla. Parenthood should have been our crowning joy, yet Reginald drifted away emotionally the moment those babies arrived. He contributed financially at first, which was helpful, but I was the one feeding them through the night, bathing them, tackling an endless mountain of diapers. On top of that, I discovered, too late, that Reginald's heart had never truly belonged to me. It had always been tethered to another woman, Celeste. This Celeste was no fleeting fling. She and Reginald had an entire love story that stretched back to college. She married someone else due to family pressures, but their old flame never died. Over time, Reginald funneled money from our meager savings to Celeste and even arranged for his mother, Adele, to nanny Celeste's child from her first marriage. Yes, Reginald's own mother willingly took care of Celeste's daughter instead of her own grandchildren. Meanwhile, I was left drowning in responsibility, so exhausted I didn't have time to see my own exhaustion as abnormal. When the truth finally smacked me in the face, I initiated a war of confrontations, letters to his workplace, pleas to my own parents. No one cared enough to help, to hold him accountable. My father said I was being dramatic. All men stray a bit, he told me. Endure for the kids. But how do you endure a husband who leaves you alone with screaming infants night after night while he plays savior to another family? The day I demanded a divorce, Reginald called me insane. In the meltdown that followed, objects were shattered and furniture was knocked over. The police got involved. Our marriage ended, but the scars never left me. In the divorce, Reginald refused to let me keep both kids. He insisted on raising Damon, while I got Layla. But like everything with him, it was smoke and mirrors. He did it more to hurt me than because he actually wanted Damon around. Eventually, Damon, barely a teen at the time, moved in with me anyway after some explosive fights with Celeste, and Reginald, ironically, never fought to get him back. Child support arrived sporadically, then not at all. I ended up raising both kids alone, hustling to climb the ranks at a clothing export company just to keep them fed. But I was fueled by anger and heartbreak. In time, I surpassed every limitation thrown at me. My name soared as I mastered the intricacies of international trade, pushing me into a managerial position handling European markets. The irony? My bitter rival at work was none other than Trudy, the same woman who gloated over my kids' behavior years later. Trudy couldn't stand that I outperformed her, but I kept forging ahead because I had no choice. Damon and Layla needed me. By the time I retired, I wasn't a millionaire, but I'd saved a decent amount. I had also scrimped and saved to buy a small house and eventually sold it at a profit when property values soared. With that money, I helped Damon finance a house of his own, placing the mortgage in my name so he could enjoy a more flexible lifestyle. For Layla, I financed an expensive college education and later paid the deposit on her apartment near her office. I never blinked, never questioned, because they were my children, and supporting them felt like my moral duty. Little did I know that these two would stand in front of a camera a decade later, praising Celeste as the real mom. I guess if you define real mom as the one who shows up with glitzy jewelry and an open bar, I never stood a chance. Before we go any further, let me pause to ask. Comment 1 if you're someone who believes in unconditional parental support, or 2 if you think tough love should have limits. I genuinely want to know your stance. The day after my humiliating discovery, learning that Damon and Layla had been feasting at Celeste's grand anniversary while ignoring my birthday, I shut myself away, blinds drawn, phone switched off. Around noon, an unexpected rattling of keys alerted me to their arrival. They entered my home like it was any other Saturday, but the tension in their eyes betrayed that they knew I was upset. My granddaughter, Elise, bounded in first, all bright-eyed. "Grandma, are we going to have your birthday cake now?" she chirped. I sat there, arms crossed, chest tight with sorrow and simmering anger. Damon and Layla tried to appease me with a small store-bought cake topped with a Disney princess figurine. They hovered around me, spouting half-baked excuses. "We tried to make it yesterday, Mom, but work got in the way," Damon said, avoiding my gaze. Layla nodded, saying, "It was a hectic day. I had an urgent meeting." I knew they were lying straight to my face. Something in me snapped. I simply told them I knew where they had been. I confronted them about the lavish gifts, the sweet words for Celeste. They froze. Layla's eyes flickered with guilt, then defiance. Damon stared at the floor, apparently speechless. Finally, Layla spoke a sentence that still scalds my heart. "Dad and Celeste have better connections, Mom. I need them if I want to get ahead in my career. I wish you could just let go of the past." I can't describe the fury and heartbreak I felt in that moment. More humiliating than discovering they were at Celeste's party was realizing that they saw me, their own mother, as an obstacle. In the end, they left, taking Elise with them. No apology, no contrition, just an unspoken sense that I was being unreasonable and stuck in my bitterness. That same night, I opened my bedside drawer, took out the property contracts and the $1 million checks I'd had made out to Damon and Layla, and stared at them for a long time. Eventually, I ran them through the shredder, tears burning my cheeks. I wish I could say that was the end of it, me tearing up those checks and deciding to move on with my life. But heartbreak rarely ends so cleanly. In my case, what followed was a tumultuous series of confrontations. The next morning, Damon discovered that I had canceled the mortgage arrangement. He showed up, banging on my door, face contorted with rage. "How could you do this to me, Mom? I have a family to support. You just want to ruin my life because I didn't show up for some stupid birthday dinner?" His words knifed through me. Where was the son who used to cling to me after a nightmare, trembling until I crooned lullabies into his ear? Where was the boy who once tearfully swore he'd make all my sacrifices worth it one day? Damon had transformed into a man I could hardly recognize, so entitled that he believed I was obligated to keep financing his life. No questions asked. Layla wasn't any better. Though she wouldn't barge into my home, she sent a barrage of messages accusing me of being toxic. She ended her texts with statements like, "You're pushing us away. If you just relax about Dad and Celeste, things would be so much easier. Why do you insist on living in the past?" My fatherly neighbor, Harriet's husband, quietly reminded me, "You've spent your whole life giving to these kids. Sometimes you have to let them face the consequences of their own decisions." Wise words indeed. But how do you unlearn decades of motherly sacrifice overnight? A few days later, to quell Damon's accusations, I arranged for a lawyer to confirm my full legal right to sell the property under my name. Yes, I'd once intended to hand over ownership to Damon. Now that dream was gone. The house was put on the market, and I braced myself for the backlash. Let me pause again to ask for your thoughts. Please comment 1 if you think I was right to cut them off financially, or 2 if you believe I should have found a middle ground. This is such a tangled moral issue, and I'm curious how you see it. Soon after, I quietly moved from my old rental apartment into a cozy 2-story home in a gated community on the edge of the city. It wasn't a flashy mansion, just a warm place with a private garden where I could plant peonies in the spring and watch stray cats laze in the sun. For the first time in ages, I felt as if I were breathing fresh air, free from the oppressive weight of pleasing everyone else. I even decided to adopt 2 rescue cats from a local shelter. I named them Meadow and Stormy. Meadow loved curling up by my feet while I read, and Stormy followed me around the house, meowing for attention. Their quiet companionship reminded me that love can be simple and unconditional, a stark contrast to the heartbreak that had become synonymous with my own children. Of course, that peace wasn't meant to last. Before long, Damon and Layla tried every tactic to contact me. They even convinced my own brother, Horace, to show up unexpectedly, claiming that our elderly parents needed care. Horace insisted that family duty required me to go back and nurse my father, who had recently taken a fall. I almost laughed at the audacity. My father had never so much as offered me emotional support when I was at my lowest. Yet now that he was bedridden, he suddenly remembered I existed. In that confrontation, Horace threatened that he'd have my retirement garnished if I refused to pay for a nurse. He even brandished some legal papers that said adult children have an obligation to support their parents. I told him calmly, "Go right ahead and sue me. I'll show the courts every last hospital bill and eviction notice I've handled for our parents over the decades, not to mention how they turned their back on me when I filed for divorce. I don't owe them anything." Horace, too lazy to mount a real legal fight, stormed out in a huff. It felt like a victory, one more chain that had been cut from around my heart. I won the lottery this year, $20 million. It just so happened that my 66th birthday was a week away. I planned to share this incredible surprise with my children when they came over to celebrate. I had it all figured out after taxes. I would take the remaining winnings and buy a luxury home for each of them, my son Logan and my daughter Luna. On top of that, I'd write each of them a check for $1 million. But when my birthday finally arrived, I sat at the dining table staring at the spread of carefully prepared dishes, waiting and waiting. By 10 o'clock that night, neither Logan nor Luna had shown up. I called them both multiple times, but no one picked up. A creeping unease settled in my chest that afternoon around 3 or 4. Luna had called saying she had to stay late at work and might be home later than expected shortly after Logan texted me saying there was an issue with a project he was managing and he'd be delayed as well. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. I simply told them it was work came first. But now it was already 10, half an hour ago. I'd sent a message, returning to my expanded version of events. I stayed true to my word. I refused to pay for my parents' care, though I did send them a single check for $10,000 when my father's condition deteriorated. I left a note telling my mother to use that money for funeral expenses because I wanted no further contact. Harsh, yes, but it was what they had effectively taught me. My father soon passed away, and I did not attend the funeral. I was told my mother wept, but at her advanced age, she did nothing to rectify the decades of neglect. After that, Horace slunk away. Now, one might assume that Damon and Layla, feeling the sting of lost finances, would vanish from my life entirely. But fate has a twisted sense of humor. Within 6 months, Damon's marriage collapsed. His wife discovered he'd been unfaithful, apparently hooking up with a woman introduced by none other than Celeste. Furious, Damon's wife left, and Damon ended up in a small apartment he could barely afford. Then came Reginald's stroke, which knocked half his body out of commission. Celeste, discovering that care costs would drain their finances, abandoned him. Suddenly, Damon had a disabled father dropped on his doorstep. Layla also hit a personal crisis. She was pregnant, only to discover her husband had an entire second relationship. She confronted him, and he lashed out violently. Realizing she was trapped in a marriage that mirrored my own nightmare, she filed for divorce. She moved to another city, trying to piece her life together as a single mother. And so, ironically, both of my kids ended up tasting the bitterness of betrayal, maybe for the first time in their lives. I was busy, though, building a new life for myself. I used a portion of my lottery winnings to open a spacious cafe bookstore. The concept was simple: serve quality coffee, let people read or work in a comfy environment, and host special monthly events to draw in crowds. The cafe bookstore took shape in a bright, airy space near a bustling arts district. I hired young baristas and librarians, mostly students needing part-time hours. Some had disabilities and needed extra support. I saw pieces of my younger self in them, hustling for a chance, grateful for every small kindness. I made sure to pay them well above minimum wage, figuring the money wouldn't dent my fortune much, but it could mean the world to them. And something magical happened. Word got around. Influencers and local bloggers labeled us the perfect study date spot. Business boomed. Instead of draining my finances, I was turning a monthly profit. While I liked the stability, I loved the sense of having created a community hub. People from all walks of life came in to savor cappuccinos while reading novels or setting up their laptops. We had open mic nights, poetry slams, even a cat adoption day once a month. Meadow and Stormy were the cafe's unofficial mascots, swirling around patrons' legs, purring in delight. It was in this cafe, ironically, that I crossed paths with Damon's soon-to-be ex-wife one afternoon. She walked in with another man, their hands entwined, but as soon as she spotted me behind the counter, her face went pale. She admitted quietly that she and Damon were separating, and she intended to move on with her life. Strangely, I felt no animosity toward her. She was just another person Damon had taken for granted and betrayed. We exchanged a few words, but there wasn't much else to say. Eventually, she left with a soft, "Take care." I still got updates about Damon and Layla in bits and pieces from Harriet or from distant acquaintances. Damon was buried under debt, caring for Reginald, and furious at Celeste for bailing. Layla was raising her new baby alone, scraping by with a modest job in a different city, away from it all. Neither dared to come begging me for help, perhaps out of pride, or perhaps they knew I wouldn't budge. Then, one chilly afternoon, a fragile figure walked into my cafe. It was Layla, visibly pregnant again, but drawn, pale, a bruise discoloring her left temple. My heart plummeted. No matter how angry or disillusioned I felt, seeing my daughter hurt triggered a protective instinct I couldn't fully suppress. She sank into a seat by the window, too exhausted to cry. I hesitated. My mind told me to walk away, to remind myself of every cruel word she'd hurled at me, every betrayal. Yet my feet drifted toward her. I placed a glass of water on the table, aware that coffee might not be the best for her condition. She stared at it, tears forming in her eyes. "Mom," she whispered, "I messed up." She then recounted the entire saga, how her husband, presumably a kind and supportive man, had turned out to be living a double life. She discovered he had fathered a child with his mistress, and when she confronted him, he struck her. She'd fled with nothing but the clothes on her back, pregnant and terrified. A swirl of conflicting emotions tore through me: compassion, anger, sadness, a flicker of satisfaction at the cosmic justice. She was tasting the heartbreak I once knew. Still, I felt no triumph. Pain was pain, and she was my daughter. But I couldn't revert to the naive mother who offered unconditional rescue. That person no longer existed. Layla confessed she'd come hoping for forgiveness, maybe even help. She said, "I see now what you went through with Dad. I'm sorry I didn't understand." Her words were a trembling attempt at rebuilding a burnt bridge. I stood silent, arms folded. "Layla," I said quietly, "you spent years prioritizing people who hurt me. I can't just snap my fingers and forget all that. If you want to fix your life, start by believing you can stand on your own. Don't look for a man or for me to save you." She nodded, eyes watering, but a hint of determination flickered in her gaze. We parted ways without a hug or a promise, just a trace of understanding. Months later, winter's gloom gave way to spring's warmth. My cafe continued to thrive, and I added a small gallery corner where local artists could display their work. I found tremendous satisfaction in fostering creativity, giving a platform to those who might otherwise never have the chance. My staff joked that I was the philanthropic barista boss, always seeking new ways to brighten someone's day. Meanwhile, news filtered back to me that Reginald's health had plummeted further. The stroke had been followed by another mild seizure, leaving him with even less mobility. Damon was at his wits' end, simultaneously broke and resentful. Celeste never returned. She'd left him for someone wealthier, rumor said. Reginald, once so confident in his ability to juggle two families, was paying the ultimate price in a dingy apartment that reeked of disinfectant wipes. But I didn't rejoice in his downfall. If anything, I thought it a pitiful end to a man who never appreciated the devotion he was given. The entire fiasco served as a grim backdrop to my daily life, a cautionary tale about what happens when you invest your life in illusions. One golden afternoon, while closing up the cafe, Harriet and I sat on the front steps, sipping leftover cappuccinos. A battered sedan pulled up, and out stepped Layla, balancing her newborn in a carrier, followed by a restless toddler. My granddaughter. I watched from a distance as Layla approached gingerly, the toddler clinging to her leg. She waved timidly, as if requesting permission to step onto the premises. I nodded. We talked, not mother to child, but more like two wary acquaintances trying to interpret each other's hearts. She apologized again, not with tears or drama, but with a soft sincerity that felt real. She explained her new life, a cramped one-bedroom, minimal child support from her ex, daily budgeting with leftover coupons. She was exhausted but proud that she'd managed this far without leaning on Reginald or Celeste. "Mom," she whispered, "I know you can't forget what we did, but I hope one day you'll give me a chance to prove I'm different." I looked at her children's wide eyes, my grandkids, who stared at the bookstore cat weaving around the counter. Part of me wanted to scoop them up, show them unconditional grandmotherly love. Another part remained guarded. "Layla," I said, "I won't pretend everything can be okay overnight. But if you truly want to rebuild trust, you'll have to keep showing up, without expectations." She nodded, tears shining in her eyes, then quietly asked if she could buy some used children's books from our library corner. "I'm trying to read to them at night, but we can't afford new ones," she murmured. I told her she could have them, no charge. She looked both grateful and embarrassed. Then she left, toddlers in tow, balancing the books under one arm and her baby carrier over the other. Harriet, watching from a distance, wiped a tear. "Sometimes people do change," she said softly. That evening, alone in my new home, I felt an unsteady swirl of emotions. If Layla was truly remorseful, where did that leave Damon? My sources told me he had grown cold and resentful, blaming everyone else for his misery. Possibly, he'd never learned the lesson that nothing in life is guaranteed. In the hush of that night, a bold idea emerged in my mind, giving the bulk of my lottery winnings to a worthy cause. If my children wouldn't appreciate it, perhaps hundreds or thousands of others might. Did my kids truly deserve the money I'd once set aside for them? Couldn't that money serve a higher purpose somewhere else? But before finalizing such a dramatic move, let me pause again to ask for your reaction. Comment 1 if you think giving away the money is a path to redemption, or 2 if you think I should keep it. I value your opinion because this decision would fundamentally alter the rest of my life. Let me know what's on your mind. As the weeks passed, I researched various charities and philanthropic initiatives, homeless shelters, educational programs, advocacy groups for single mothers, job training for the disabled. I spoke to lawyers and financial advisors, ensuring that my donation wouldn't be tangled in red tape. The more I learned, the more excited I became. Using my windfall to uplift countless strangers felt strangely more fulfilling than handing it to children who had disowned me in favor of Celeste. Then, one morning, I woke to a string of missed calls from Layla. Alarmed, I phoned her back. She sounded panicked. Damon had called her in a meltdown, claiming he was suicidal. Reginald's health had cost him thousands in medical bills. Debt collectors were calling at all hours. He had lost his job. Celeste had cleaned out any joint accounts. For Damon, the dream of comfortable living had crashed into a wall of reality. Layla asked tearfully, "Mom, I know we don't deserve it, but could you please talk to Damon? Even if you don't want to give him money, maybe just hearing you might help." A pang of old maternal instinct flared. Damon was still my son. I thought about the wide-eyed little boy who once pressed daisies into my hand, just because. I agreed, partly out of concern for a man on the brink, partly because I needed closure. When Damon answered my call, I heard utter defeat. "Mom, I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I was horrible to you. Now I've lost everything." For a moment, I felt an ache in my chest. Then I remembered how he'd berated me for ruining his life. Still, I listened. The last shred of compassion inside me told him he needed professional help, therapy, job counseling, something. "But if you're asking for money, the answer is no," I said gently but firmly. "I can't bail you out." He wept. I closed my eyes, forcibly reminding myself that enabling him would only set us back. That phone call left me unsettled. I prayed Damon would seek counseling or find a legitimate job solution. I offered to call some old colleagues who might help him get entry-level work, but he resisted, grumbling that it was beneath him. He was used to bigger salaries, grander ambitions. The conversation ended awkwardly. Around that time, something else significant happened. Layla began regularly bringing her 2 children to my cafe. She never asked for freebies, but she bought small pastries and let the kids explore the children's nook. She'd chat with the staff, volunteer to help stack books, or read stories aloud for the kids who gathered. Over time, the entire cafe staff grew fond of her. One teenager who worked part-time said to me, "Layla's so kind and patient. She's taught me some cool budgeting tips for single moms, even though I'm not a mom." I smiled, observing the transformation. Layla had discovered a kind of empathy she'd lacked before, a humility that made her appreciate small acts of kindness. It was progress. Each time she appeared, the old tension in my chest lessened. She never once asked me for money. Instead, she seemed determined to stand on her own feet. On a breezy autumn afternoon, I invited Layla to sit with me at a corner table. We spoke at length, perhaps more openly than ever. She apologized for the past, not in a dramatic meltdown, but in a calm, reflective tone, acknowledging that her ambition once led her to idolize Celeste's connections and ignore how deeply it hurt me. She admitted being blindsided when her own husband betrayed her, realizing too late that any relationship built on advantage rather than genuine love was doomed. I didn't jump into her arms, too many scars. But I nodded and we continued talking about her kids, her modest dreams, her new job. She was gradually building a stable life. At the end of that conversation, she hesitantly asked, "Mom, if it's not too much to say, would you ever let me help out with the cafe?" It was the first time Layla asked to contribute rather than take. I let Layla pick up a few shifts behind the cafe counter, fully paid, though she initially offered to volunteer. Over a handful of weeks, she proved herself diligent, kind to customers, and adept at quickly picking up the nuances of the espresso machine. If she was late or had to handle her kids, she'd always arrange coverage or communicate clearly. The staff appreciated her sincerity and quickly included her in the team dynamic. On a personal note, I found a cautious sense of pride watching her, but also a guarded heart. I'd look at her face, so reminiscent of Reginald's cheekbones, and recall how she once championed Celeste's place in her life. Yet, day by day, her dedication chipped away at my armor. I began letting her babysit the shop in the evenings, trusting her with the lockup routine. Occasionally, we'd share a late dinner, seated at a small table amid the quiet hum of the coffee machines. We'd talk about everything, her new challenges, my cats, the latest cafe flavors. It felt good. Simultaneously, Damon's calls to me were sporadic, mostly fraught with desperation. He'd found a job as a junior data entry clerk, a far cry from the managerial positions he once held. Bitter and depressed, he complained that it was humiliating to be starting over. He begged me multiple times to settle his debts. Each time, I told him gently, "I'm sorry, but I can't be your solution." Perhaps if I hadn't gone through decades of heartbreak, I might have caved, but I knew that Damon needed to confront his own reality, just like I once had to. Around the same period, a local news outlet interviewed me about the cafe's success in integrating reading programs and employing differently abled workers. Word spread quickly about our philanthropic angle, leading to an influx of curious patrons. I could see in Layla's eyes a sense of awe that her mother, whom she once deemed weak and bitter, was actively shaping the community. As my 67th birthday approached, Harriet proposed throwing me a festive party at the cafe. I cringed internally at the thought. After all, birthdays carried the memory of last year's abandonment. But Harriet insisted, reminding me that I had a new circle of people who genuinely cared. The staff was excited too, eager to celebrate their boss lady's special day. Eventually, I agreed, deciding it could be a quiet potluck, with homemade dishes, close friends, and the occasional customer dropping by. Layla volunteered to decorate. She hung pastel-colored banners and arranged vases of fresh daisies along the windowsills. Even her kids pitched in, blowing up balloons and giggling at every squeak. On the morning of the celebration, I arrived at the cafe to find the entrance lined with small chalkboards scrawled with sweet messages. "Happy birthday, Mirabelle. Thank you for giving us a chance. We love you, boss." Seeing those messages made my throat tighten with emotion. I'd spent so many years yearning for that sort of genuine appreciation from Damon and Layla, only to find it instead in a patchwork family of employees and neighbors. Halfway through the day's festivities, the front door opened, and in walked Damon. He looked out of place, unshaven, tired, but with a restless, haunted energy. People stared. Layla froze, a ribbon still in her hand. Then Damon shuffled over to me, holding a single red rose. No fancy packaging, no speech. He extended it and said quietly, "Happy birthday, Mom." A hush enveloped the cafe. After a painfully long pause, I nodded in thanks, accepting the rose. He stepped back, glancing around as if searching for a corner to hide in. Layla approached him, but the mood was tense. Some staff members, aware of my backstory, cast wary looks his way. Despite the tension, the day continued. Harriet made a fuss over me, hugging me tight. A few longtime patrons stopped by with small gifts. Even the local newspaper columnist dropped in for a photo op. In the swirl of well-wishers, Damon lingered on the sidelines, wearing regret like a heavy coat. That evening, when the cafe had mostly emptied, Damon, Layla, and I found ourselves alone by the dessert display. My staff had gone to the back room to finish cleaning, Harriet had stepped out, and the lights were dimming. Neither child seemed sure how to start. Finally, Layla cleared her throat. Damon, do you want to say something to Mom? She asked gently. Damon fiddled with the rose's stem, then mumbled, I messed up, Mom. I know that. I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much you'd done for me. His voice cracked. I got caught up chasing the easy path, looking for Dad's help, Celeste's approval, and I ended up with nothing. I stayed silent, letting him gather his thoughts. His eyes glistened. But I'm not here to beg for money. I promise. I just want you to know I see it all now. I see how big your heart is, how it's bigger than anything we deserved. He swallowed hard. And I want to be better, even if it takes a long time. Layla wiped tears from her cheeks, nodding in support. I was shaken, though I tried to keep my composure. So much had happened, so many wounds. Damon, I finally said, I appreciate your words, but trust is something we rebuild inch by inch. You can't undo years of hurt in a single night. His head dropped in understanding. We stood there in an awkward hush, broken only by the hiss of the coffee machine in the back. For once, it felt like real honesty. No expectations of a check, no manipulative pleas for a rescue. I offered him a seat at a nearby table, and Layla joined us. The three of us ended up talking quietly for the next hour, small confessions slipping out between sips of coffee. Damon admitted he was in therapy. Layla discussed the difficulties of single parenting. I listened, feeling both guarded and strangely hopeful. Before I continue, I'd love your take. Comment 1 if you believe second chances can mend these relationships, or 2 if you think once trust is shattered, it's best to move on. Your perspectives matter as I navigate this final stretch. After that night, Damon occasionally visited the cafe. His intention wasn't to beg. He'd simply sit in a corner with a laptop, scanning job boards. Sometimes he'd share a hushed chat with Layla, who was busy plating cakes or frothing milk for customers. I sensed the guilt in him, how he struggled to show remorse without wallowing in self-loathing. One Sunday, long after closing, Damon stayed behind, helping us wipe tables and mop floors. I tried not to read too much into it. Maybe he was bored, maybe lonely, but once we finished, he approached me hesitantly. Mom, I'd like to pay you back for the mortgage you had to cover all those years, he said, voice trembling. I don't have money now, but I'll get there someday. I promise. That single statement, small as it was, resonated deeply in me. For so long, Damon acted as if it was my sworn duty to shoulder every burden. Now he was at least voicing that he owed me something, even if intangible. I responded softly, if you really feel that way, then pay me back by becoming a man who stands on his own 2 feet. Meanwhile, Layla took on more hours at the cafe. She proposed ideas like a parents' circle on Saturday mornings, where mothers and fathers could gather with their young kids for story time. It'll bring in more families, she explained, and create a community vibe. I consented, and it quickly became a hit, with lines out the door. I watched her read aloud to a circle of wide-eyed toddlers, including her own, and a quiet emotion blossomed in me. Pride, acceptance, maybe even the earliest glimmer of forgiveness. But if you're waiting for a perfect fairy tale ending, let me say now, old wounds don't vanish overnight. There were days Damon slipped into bitterness, cursing fate for his predicament. There were times Layla fought her own regrets, lapsing into tears when baby expenses piled up. I maintained boundaries, refusing to solve every crisis for them. But we were talking, building a relationship not based on illusions, but on raw, honest effort. Amid all this, I never forgot my resolution to donate a large sum of my lottery winnings. Quietly, behind the scenes, I established the M. Crandall Foundation. focusing on programs for single parents, battered women, and educational scholarships. I poured in $2 million to start, an amount I might once have earmarked for Damon and Layla's real estate dreams. This felt more meaningful. It wasn't about punishing my children, but rather redirecting what they had refused to value toward people who truly needed hope. In the process of setting this up, I realized something. Charity, much like parenthood, can fill you with warmth, but it must be done with clear intentions. I wasn't trying to buy moral superiority. I wanted to honor the countless mothers and fathers who, like me, once faced adversity with no safety net. Now and then, Layla would spot the foundation's brochures in my office at the cafe. She never pried, never asked for a piece of the funds. That told me more than any apology ever could. One evening, she tentatively asked if she could volunteer, helping with a small workshop for single mothers. I agreed. She arrived early, stayed late, assisting participants with budgeting plans and conversation. At one point, I glimpsed her demonstrating how to stretch a $50 grocery budget to feed a family for a week. The women around her looked on with admiration, scribbling notes. My heart clenched in awe, seeing how far Layla had come from the daughter who once spent thousands on lavish gifts to impress Celeste. Damon, on the other hand, had a slower climb. Though he'd parted ways with Reginald, he continued to wrestle with self-pity. One day he confided in me about the emotional scars from living in Reginald's household, the constant belittling from Celeste, the sense that Dad only valued him when it was convenient. I see now, he said, that I ran to them for validation because I thought it was easier than earning your trust. I was wrong. A year after that fateful birthday, I found myself seated at a small dais, addressing a crowd of about 50 single parents, social workers, and volunteers. It was the official launch event for the M. Crandall Foundation. My staff had set up a microphone in the cafe's performance area, floral arrangements brightening the stage. I shared my story, at least the broad strokes, and explained why I believed in empowering single parents. Layla stood off to the side, her little ones in tow. Damon lingered near the door. I saw tears glistening in their eyes as I recounted how I once had no support beyond my own grit. The crowd applauded, tears mixing with joyful smiles. It felt surreal and cathartic. After the event, Harriet pulled me aside. "You've done something remarkable," she said, hugging me. "It's not just about the money. You're giving people hope." Damon approached, shoulders squared, and said, "Mom, I want to help too once I'm on my feet. Maybe I can run job training seminars or something in data management. I I just want to contribute." I nodded, feeling a mix of gratitude and lingering caution. "We'll see," I said. "Focus on building yourself first." That night, after closing, Layla remained with me, helping to tidy up the decorations. We sat for a while in the hush, sipping leftover lukewarm cocoa. "Mom," she finally said, "I know your foundation is for single parents. I'm technically single, but I'm not asking you to fund me." She bit her lip. "I want you to know that. I'm here because I believe in this mission, not because I want to take advantage of it." I told her I understood and that her involvement touched me deeply. We ended up talking about books we'd read, even laughing at old memories of her childhood pranks. Slowly, a mother-daughter bond was reforming, fragile but real. Then came the moment that tested everything. Damon called me late one night, voice trembling. Reginald had passed away, heart complications linked to his stroke. Damon was torn. Part of him felt obligated to hold a funeral, but the other part raged at how Reginald had used him. "What do I do, Mom?" he asked. "I don't have the money for a fancy service, and Celeste is gone. Layla can't help. Should I just skip it entirely?" Memories of my own father's funeral came flooding back. I recalled how I paid for it out of a sense of final duty, even though we had never reconciled. In the end, I told Damon, Do what you feel is right for your own peace of mind. A week later, he sent me a text with the time and place for a simple cremation ceremony. No suits, no big gathering, just a short farewell at a budget crematorium. I wrestled with whether to go. Ultimately, I did. Not out of any fondness for Reginald, but because Damon, despite his flaws, was my son, and I wanted to stand beside him in his final goodbye. Celeste did not show up. Only Damon, Layla, a handful of old neighbors, and a distant cousin arrived. It was quiet and awkward, overshadowed by unspoken resentments. But in that subdued environment, Damon placed a single rose on the casket and murmured, "Dad, I hope wherever you are, you find peace. I forgive you." I felt a slight pang in my chest. Forgiveness is never simple. It doesn't mean excusing the harm done, but it can free you from the shackles of hatred. For years, I had been weighed down by bitterness, and ironically, it was Damon who reminded me that you can't hold on to rage forever. Still, as I left the crematorium, I reaffirmed my boundary. I wouldn't let my guard down completely. Damon and Layla had started to change, but trust requires consistent action. For me, giving them a chance didn't mean returning to the role of a doormat. It meant acknowledging their efforts without surrendering my self-respect. Now I'm 68, content in ways I never thought possible. The cafe bookstore bustles daily. Sometimes we can hardly keep up with the lines. Layla helps manage weekend story circles, balancing her own children's schedule with remarkable grace. Damon recently volunteered to hold a weekly computer skills workshop for underemployed parents who visit the Foundation's events. I see him teaching job search strategies, explaining Excel spreadsheets. Little by little, he's paying forward what he once demanded from me. And what became of that $1 million I initially intended as a gift for each child? It's gone to nonprofits, scholarships, emergency funds for battered women. I saved what I need for my own comfortable retirement, and the rest has been given to those who truly appreciate a helping hand. My children understand that. Not once have they voiced a complaint since these changes took root. A couple of weeks ago, Layla hesitantly asked if I'd ever consider letting her kids call me Grandma Belle. "Only if you want that," she whispered. I found myself smiling in a way I haven't in decades. "I'd like that very much," I told her. She cried, tears of relief, tears of hope. I can't say for certain what the future holds for us. The pain we weathered isn't undone by a few tears or late confessions, but we're learning to exist in each other's lives without the old illusions. We no longer revolve around money or grudges or illusions that the perfect family must look a certain way. Maybe that's the best form of redemption. If you've journeyed through my story to this point, I'd love one final piece of input from you. Comment 1 if you believe healing is truly possible after so much pain, or 2 if you think some wounds never fully heal. There is no right or wrong answer, just the mosaic of human experience. In any case, this is my testimony. I once set aside $1 million for each of my kids, only to watch them turn to their father's mistress and call her mom. So I gave it all away to strangers, to cats, to a beautiful cafe that serves more than coffee. And perhaps, in the end, that radical act of self-liberation is what allowed my children and me to find each other again. Not as we once were, but maybe as we were always meant to be. As we wrap up today's powerful story, I want to hear from you. Was our protagonist right to give all her money away, or should she have forgiven her children instead? It's a tough choice, and everyone has their own opinion, so comment below 1 if you support her bold decision, or 2 if you think she should have given her children another chance. I also want to know, have you ever faced a similar situation or known someone who has? Share your thoughts, experiences, and reactions in the comments. Let's get the conversation going. Your perspectives help us build an amazing storytelling community. And don't forget, if you've enjoyed this emotional journey, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. We have plenty more heart-touching and eye-opening stories on the way, and you won't want to miss out. Thanks for being part of our storytelling family, and we'll see you in the next video.